So welcome everyone. This session is for you if you are studying. A lot of you think are studying at university. I think we might actually have a couple of students who are in year 12. So that's great that you are starting to prepare already for your career after school. So today I want to talk to you, Okay, I'll just introduce myself and give you a little bit of information about my background. So I left school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at school, which I think in these days you were very fortunate at Caulfield to have a careers team. When I went to school, there wasn't a lot of, actually we had no careers at the school. I went to a private school, but we had no careers department at all. So I was a bit lost when I left school. However, I was good at maths and I ended up doing a Bachelor of Commerce at Melbourne Uni. And I ended up, my first job or my first career was working at the Big Four firm KPMG in their corporate tax division. And so I worked at KPMG for about 4 years and I did further study to become a chartered accountant. But during that time, I realized that tax I wasn't using my natural strengths. Working in tax, it was really like it's really more like corporate law. So reading tax legislation, interpreting tax cases and applying, writing letters of advice, applying knowledge. And it really wasn't something that I really enjoyed. It didn't come naturally to me. And so after I finished my qualifications to become a chartered accountant, I actually left KPMG and I moved to recruitment. And for the next 6 years, I worked in a recruitment agency, recruiting accounting and finance candidates from graduate level right through to CFO or chief financial officer level or executive level. So that was a great experience for me. It was using my natural strengths, which are more around building relationships, building rapport with people and getting to know people. That's, I guess, all my strengths are more around relating to people rather than problem solving. So I did for a number of years. I then worked in-house at Allens, which used to be called Allens Arthur Robinson, is now just called Allens, which is one of the largest law firms, national law firms. And I looked after all their recruitment and relocation for legal recruitment and their corporate services recruitment. So I was interviewing from graduate level right through the legal department to sort of senior associate level, and also recruit people for their marketing, finance, IT, the kitchen, so all different types of roles in that organisation. After working in recruitment for about 8 years, I then leveraged my recruitment process knowledge, my knowledge of how recruitment processes worked, and I actually went to work for a consulting company that helped big corporates select and implement e-recruitment technology. So that was actually more of a project management role. So I was leveraging off the recruitment background, but into a completely different function. So I did that for a number of years. I then have 3 children who don't feature on the poster. Unfortunately, my dog's the favorite in the family. So I had my 3 children, and then I set up my own business called RelaunchMe, and that was in 2014. So I think I don't have any regrets about my career, but I guess what drives me today to help have a career coaching business is understanding that people don't always know what their strengths are. They don't know what their personality is or what type of work will suit them. And so that really drives me today to help my clients identify their best fit career and careers that will be meaningful and fulfilling to them. So just to tell you a little bit about my company, as I mentioned, it was established 7 years ago. We're mostly based in Melbourne. We now have an office in Sydney. So we provide career coaching. We have a team of writers who help clients with resume, cover letter, and LinkedIn writing. We do work with clients helping with their job search strategy, and also helping clients prepare for behavioural interviews. That is from sort of intern, graduate level, right through to executive level and across all industries. It's quite a broad range of services that all sit under that career umbrella. So I was talking to Rachel and Linda about this session last year, and I thought this was a really good introductory session for young alumni who are studying at the moment and who are looking to really serious about their career after uni and looking to give themselves the best possible start when they join the workforce. Unfortunately, I'm just letting someone else in at the moment. Unfortunately, in the work that I do, I regularly work with clients who are at the end of their studies. They've possibly, worked really hard at uni to get really good marks, but perhaps haven't done some other things that they could be doing in addition to the study to, I guess, be attractive candidates to some of these big organisations that run internship and graduate programs. So having, I guess, worked at Allen and understanding what those organisations look for, as well as, I have lots of friends who've worked in graduate recruitment. I think there's some really key things that you could be doing whilst you're at university so that you are better prepared and perhaps a more attractive candidate once you get to the end of your studies. So that's what this session is all about. So what are your options after you finish your undergraduate degree? I guess there's a number of options. The first is people, after all that study, feel like they need a gap year. Unfortunately, with what we've been through in the last 12 months, there probably hasn't been any opportunity to go traveling and backpacking and doing all those things that people usually enjoy doing in a gap year. So some of you who are studying now may be waiting, I guess, until we can go overseas again and have a bit of a gap year, may work overseas or do some traveling to experience something different for a while. The other option is to go on and do postgraduate study. So I think there are some really good reasons for continuing on to do postgraduate study, depending on the type of job and the type of industry that you're looking to get into. So for example, if you are wanting to be an academic and you want to say, perhaps, do a PhD, then obviously going on and continuing on with postgraduate study is definitely something that you could consider. Likewise, some industries that have become really, really competitive and specialised, where you really need a postgraduate qualification perhaps to get your foot in the door. Another reason why you might go on straight from your undergraduate to do postgraduate would be if you've perhaps studied a very broad undergraduate degree. So I guess an example that comes to mind would be Bachelor of Arts, and perhaps by the time you've got to the end of your undergrad, you're starting to think about specialising in a different area. So I know a lot of arts undergraduate students might go on and do a postgrad in law, they might do a postgrad in human resources, etc., or communications, because by the time they've got to the end of that degree, they've decided they really would like to specialise in a particular area. Another attractive option after you complete your undergraduate degree is to go and do a formal graduate program, and that would mean that you are applying for the graduate program in the last year of your studies and then commencing usually sort of February or March the following year. The other option is you apply for entry-level jobs. So when I say an entry-level job, it would be any junior position in a company that's not part of a formal graduate program. So tonight I'm going to focus more on graduate program and what some of the benefits are of joining that program, but to also help you understand how you can be a more attractive candidate and what graduate recruiters and talent acquisition managers are looking for when they're reviewing CVs and reviewing candidates throughout the recruitment process. Okay, so in terms of benefit, often people ask me what are the benefits of a graduate program. So I guess these would be the main points that I would think are the key benefits. First of all, it is a structured program, and that can be a great benefit because often you get the opportunity to rotate around a number of different departments. Most graduate programs are 12 months. There are some that are 2 years, and often you will get to rotate between 2 and 4 different departments. So it gives you a really good idea of different areas in the company, and you get a chance to try different areas before you specialize and stay in an area. The second thing is they usually offer great support. So when you are an entry level, when you are applying for just an entry level job, you might have someone who sort of does a little bit of training with you in your first couple of days, but you don't have that ongoing support. So I remember when I started at KPMG, I was assigned a buddy who was a second year, and he was my buddy throughout the year. So basically any issues that I had with my work, or he was assigned work to me, that I always had someone that I could go to if I didn't know what to do or I needed some advice. So having that formal program can be definitely a benefit, particularly joining some of these huge firms where there's thousands and thousands of employees. I think one of the main benefits is the very structured training and development that you get in a graduate program. So usually graduates there'll be lots of programs to obviously develop your technical skills, but most importantly, you get some really good training to develop your soft skills. So it might be skills such as your business writing skills, public speaking skills, negotiation skills. It's really useful training that will develop skills, both soft and technical skills, that you will have for the rest of your career. So there's a huge investment in training, which is definitely one of the key benefits. Socially, the programs are usually pretty fun as well. So anyone who has experienced even just the graduate recruitment process, often there will be cocktail parties and welcome functions, and you have this great graduate group that you are starting off with. So usually you're going out for lunch with your graduate friends, you're going out for Friday night drinks. So there's a lot of social benefits with starting as part of a group, rather than starting just being one person who's starting in a role, perhaps not with other people at the same age or level. The other really good thing, I guess, about graduate programs is that they are generally offered by the larger global brands or big national brands. You start your career by having a really good brand on your resume, which does help, I guess, set you up for future roles. Looking back on my career, I think, I went from KPMG to quite a small recruitment firm, and then I went to Allen. I sort of feel like the opportunity at Allen's probably, I was a bit of a left field candidate, but the fact I worked in a big 4 brand at KPMG probably helped get my foot in the door there. Even now, I get clients approaching me wanting to come and work with me because I worked at KPMG, even though it was such a long time ago. So it does help sometimes with your career, even if you want to go and work for much smaller places later on, to have that big brand on your resume from the start. So you've possibly heard that these programs are competitive, but I just wanted to, I guess, share some data with you so you will understand, I guess, how competitive these can be and how important it is to start planning ahead, starting to set yourself up for success. So every year, the Australian Association of Graduate Employers, they run a number of surveys. So they run surveys on candidates, they run surveys for employers. So they collect a lot of data from both the employer and the candidates on internships and graduate program recruitment processes. So here are a couple of, I guess, that came out of a more recent survey. So in terms of the highest number of applications across different industries, the accounting and professional services firms have the highest number of applications. And as you can see there, the average was, nearly 6,000 applications for 225 jobs. The engineering consulting firms, PhD, Jacobs, some of those firms, their average was about 4,000 applications for 139 jobs. And across all industries, the average was around nearly 2,000 applications for 59 positions. So I'm not trying to scare you. I guess, you know, there are good applicants will get through the process, but there are lots of things you can be doing to help yourself, to set yourself up so that you are one of those candidates that gets through to the end. So this is a typical graduate recruitment process. The first step, as you would imagine, would be to submit a resume and a cover letter, and usually your transcript. Not all companies are asking for resumes these days. Sometimes some are removing that from the process, but often you will also have to respond to a couple of questions. So, for example, somewhere like PwC or Deloitte, you might have to select which 2 areas within their organization that you would like to work in, and you might have to respond and write a you know, couple of hundred words on why you're interested in that particular area. So that would be the first step. The second step would be often an online capability assessment. So it could be a combination of personality type questions, numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, and often now they're more a game-based assessment. So they're trying to, I guess, rather than you know, a whole list of multiple choice questions, they're trying to make it a little bit more interactive for the candidate. The next step in that process would be a digital interview, and that's often, it's now a recorded interview. You may have a time limit of about 15-20 minutes to answer a number of recorded questions. And so these could be a mix of questions about your motivations for wanting to work for that organisation. And they may be some behavioural questions as well, where they may ask you for specific examples of when you've demonstrated a particular skill in the past. So one of the sessions later this year is going to focus on preparing for behavioural interviews. So we'll cover some of those topics in that session. The next step, if you get through the digital interview, would usually be a group assessment. So this might involve you going and look at the moment doing these group assessments online. Normally you would go to the office of the organisation. You may do some role play and group assessment activities in the morning. And then if you through that part of the day, the second part of the day would be having a face-to-face interview with a hiring manager. So as you can see, it is quite an extensive process, particularly for candidates who might be going through this process with multiple organisations. So a lot of candidates apply for 5, even up to 10 or more different organisations. So if you can imagine, it gets quite busy if you're going through all these steps with a number of different organisations. Once you get through the hiring manager interview, the last step would be most companies would do a reference check. They may ask you to speak to 2 people that can verify your background and both personal or professional, and also a background check before you are provided with an offer. So I'm just keen to see if everyone can see the chat. I'd just love you to write in the chat where you are at with this process, whether you are applying for internships at the moment, whether you're applying for graduate programs, or whether you're just sort of preparing to do so in the future. So if everyone could just perhaps pop in the chat. Can everyone see the chat? Can everyone just tell me, okay, great. Ella, yeah. Okay, anyone else applying for internships or graduate programs this year or next year? Yeah. So preparing to do so in the future, preparing for internships next year. Yep, great. Ben, wanting to learn more. Great. So look, wherever you're at in the process, I think what I go through next should help you. So particularly if you're applying for this year as well. Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so going back to, I talked about those different steps in the process. So these were a few other survey results that came out of that survey I mentioned before. So on average, 37% of applicants make it to the first round, and 20% of those applicants make it to the final round. Of those 20%, 44% of the final candidates receive an offer, and 88% then choose to accept it. So remembering that often, I guess, the better candidates who get through to the end may get multiple offers, which is why some would perhaps decline an offer if they've got multiple offers. So in total, and this study is a little bit scary, approximately 3% of total applications across all industries result in a candidate being offered a graduate position. And just bear in mind that with internships, a lot of the graduate positions are going to be filled by people who've already done an internship. So if you can do some internships earlier on, it's going to greatly increase your chances of getting a graduate position at the end. Okay, so what are employees looking, sorry, that should say employers, my mistake. What are employers looking for in a candidate? So typical selection criteria, and this will vary across different organisations, but the first one is solid academics. And this cut-off will vary depending on the organisation. So some firms, some companies will actually put their WAM cut-off in the graduate program application information. So you often see there's like a credit average. I have noticed some though that do say pass average as well. So if your marks are pass credit, look, I would still apply, particularly if you have other things on your resume that will complement your academics. So they're definitely not looking, some of the, I guess, investment banks, management consulting firms, there will be some organizations that are probably looking for, more distinction average academics, but a lot of the graduate programs are around sort of a credit average. So around a 70 is usually like, I know when we worked at Allens, it was around 70 that we looked at. But if there were other things on the resume that made you an attractive candidate, then they might be, they might be a little bit below that. So I think, solid academics is important. Having some part-time work experience, and I'm going to that in a little bit more detail, will also add to your, your application, as well as being able to demonstrate some of the key skills and competencies that they're looking for. And the fourth thing would be an alignment to their values. So they're looking for candidates that they're looking for candidates who will demonstrate particular values and behaviours that are consistent with the values of the organisation. So I'm just going to run through now, I guess, how you can ensure you meet this criteria. So look, this one is pretty obvious. If you want good academics, go to your lectures, study consistently over the semester, try to avoid that last minute cram. Ask for help if you need it. So if you're a first year and you're struggling with some subjects, there are lots of tutors out there who you can access, or call your course coordinator, go and have a meeting with them. I do speak to a lot of clients who perhaps do start to fall behind in first year, and they don't realise, I guess, that they can get help, that you can, there's a website called Tutor Finder. You could find a tutor to help you if you are starting to fall a little bit behind. And look, where possible, choose subjects that you will enjoy. If you have the option to choose some subjects or a major, usually if you are choosing subjects that you enjoy, you'll use strengths, the work will probably be more enjoyable. It will come more naturally to you. And as a result, you'll probably be successful. Okay, work experience. So you don't have to necessarily, if you're wanting to work in law, you don't have to go and work in a law firm or do legal work. There are a lot of organisations and a lot of talent acquisition managers that just candidates that can communicate, that they've got good or customer service skills. And so working in retail, working in fast food, whether you're at McDonald's, whether you're at Subway, whether you're at Grilled, so working in cafes, working in call centres, or any customer service or reception role, you are going to develop invaluable soft skills. And that will be providing, really good customer service, being able to solve problems for customers, being able to deal with complaints and conflict. And so it's really obvious to employers when they're talking to candidates who've worked in these types of industries that they've, they're really able to build rapport people quickly and communicate with people from all backgrounds. So any opportunity to do work where you are dealing with the public is a great, a great role, part-time job to have on your resume. And I was recently out for dinner with a friend of mine recently who sits on the panel at L'Oreal and looks at the graduate. She recruits the graduate program there, and she said her number one thing for the graduates at L'Oreal is to look for someone who's worked in retail or hospitality. So I thought that was quite an interesting fact. So work experience where you're dealing with the public is great. If you can get some relevant work experience, particularly towards the end of your career, that is definitely going to also add to your resume. So hopefully you would already be aware that there are a couple of websites that advertise the formal internships and graduate Programs. So the first one is connection.com and the second one is gradaustralia.com. You will also sometimes internships or traineeships advertised on Seek by smaller companies. So they might be, smaller agencies, not big global brands like you see on the Grad Connection and the Grad Australia website. Apply quite a competitive process, but also don't feel like you have to rely on just the formally add your own internship. So I would really encourage you to use your own network, your parents' network, your family, friends, your alumni network, or even look for opportunities where you approach companies directly using LinkedIn and ask them if they would be willing or if they accept students for internships. So often they will be very willing to have you come in maybe 1 day a week or for a week in your holidays or 2 weeks in your holidays. Don't feel like you can only apply for the formal ones. By all means, try and use your own network to organise informal internship as well, or any part-time work. So, even if your parents have a business or your auntie or your uncle, do whatever you can to get some work experience. Okay, so then we've got the actual recruit process. So how you can really, stand out. So the first thing is really research your target company, and not just the company, but also the work areas within that organisation. So when we were recruiting at Allens years ago, it was really obvious when recruiting grads that if they'd done their research. So not only do they want candidates who want to work for Allens, they ideally, they want to hear that you have done some research, that you think corporate and commercial would be an area that you really enjoy. Perhaps you've also got an interest in competition law, and really explaining what you know about that area and why it's of interest to you. So perhaps there was, one subject that you studied at uni that was of particular interest. So I would always think, you need to be able to articulate in the recruitment process, what area of that business that you are really attracted to and why. And that will definitely make you stand out compared to other candidates. The second thing, you do need a strong resume and a well-written cover letter. Often people say, I still really need a cover letter. Yes, you do, particularly if you're applying for roles, look, any job, but that's a way that you can really differentiate yourself from other candidates by having a well-written cover letter and resume, no typos, no spelling mistakes, but succinct document articulating your achievements and strengths. As I mentioned before, there will be usually online assessments, and you can download practice assessments. So the more practice tests that you do, particularly around your numerical reasoning, your abstract reasoning, your verbal reasoning, if you can do some practice assessments, you'll be much more prepared than the first time you're doing as part of the recruitment process. Likewise, practice video interviews. Even if it's just practicing with a friend, set up a Zoom call, do a mock interview with your friends, just so that you get used to, basically answering questions into a screen. So something that it wasn't even part of the recruitment process years ago. Now it's a way that they can screen candidates a little bit quicker rather than having to go through the process and meet everyone. So practice those as well, and really understand and prepare for a formal behavioural interview, which we're going to focus on in a session later in the year. So it's really important that you're preparing well for those interviews. Okay, so these are some of the key skills and competencies that companies are looking for. So, some of these are pretty obvious. They're looking for leadership, they're looking for teamwork, written and verbal communication, problem-solving skills, creativity and innovation, interpersonal skills and relationship building. So each company will have their own set of criteria, but these are some of the common ones, as well as the criteria on the next page as well. So I've got accountability. So, it's about taking responsibility, admitting mistakes. Often you'll get asked a question like, tell us about a time you made a mistake. Pretty tricky one if you haven't prepared for it. A lot of organisations are also wanting candidates to be able to demonstrate resilience. Conflict resolution skills is one that comes up pretty often. Commercial and business, and so what I was talking about before, having a good sense of the different areas in the business and what they actually do. That's a part of, demonstrating you've got good business acumen, as well as other things that you can be doing, which we're going to cover in a minute. And another one is diversity. So diversity and inclusion is a view that most organisations have these days. So being able to demonstrate that you have worked with people or spent time with people with different backgrounds to yourself is also a really important skill or value that you can, that you need to be able to demonstrate. So they're not necessarily going to be, every company isn't going to be necessarily looking for all of these, but these are common ones that will come up throughout the interview process and the recruitment process. So some ways that you could be demonstrating leadership, teamwork skills. And I am aware that with COVID, it's been probably quite difficult for people at uni to get involved in all the things that you would normally do if you weren't in uni from home. So look, when things return to normal, I would encourage you to get involved with some clubs at university or get on some committees. And you'll see there that I've got less more. So what I mean by that is look for depth, not breadth. If you can get heavily involved with one or two clubs or committees, or even just one, where you become a member of the committee, it's better than being a member of 5 or 6 clubs and not really adding a lot of value or playing a key part in that club. Get involved in any team competitions like case competitions or anything else where you can work as part of a team. Obviously, playing sport, coaching sport, if you've left school and you're looking to sort of coach at another school, for instance. That's all about working as part of a team, and also opportunities to mentor the young students or younger people is an important skill. Can anyone think of, if you have some other ideas about leadership and teamwork skills, drop them into the chat and we can have a chat about those at the end as well. Okay, verbal communication skills. So as I mentioned before, any part-time work where you're facing customers is going to really help you develop your communication skills. And I think this is particularly important if you are someone who is perhaps a little bit more introverted or a little bit shy. I'm not necessarily saying doing customer-facing work is going to, it's perhaps not your best fit here. You probably don't want to be doing that forever. Will probably help you if you are someone who finds it quite difficult to meet new people or to chat to new people. Then putting yourself out of your comfort zone and perhaps doing a role like that, whether it's call center work on the phone or working in fast food, it's really going to help you to develop that customer service and communication skills. Obviously, other activities that you have probably done at school, debating, performing arts, mooting, etc. If you've got the opportunity, try not to drop those things after school and try and, also get involved in things like that at university. I do, a lot of clients often go to university and sort of just drop all the things that they're doing at school to focus on the study. The problem being, as you can see from, what I've talked about already, when they get to that interview with, your KPMG or, Freehills or whoever it is, and they're looking for a specific example of when you've worked as part of a team or when you've demonstrated leadership. If you haven't been involved in anything outside of study, it's really hard to think of it. It's really hard to come up with an example. So the more you're involved with, whether it's doing part-time work, being on a committee, being in a debating team, etc., it will give you more material to help you develop some examples that you can use in your interviews in the recruitment process. So there's a few other things that are, you could get involved with Toastmasters, which is a global organisation with many chapters around the world and in Melbourne. And Toastmasters is great for people who really want to work on their public speaking skills, learning how to run a meeting and learning how to present. So if you, are looking to develop a career where it's going to be important to be public speaking, then that could be a really great organisation to join. Written communication is also really important. So, a number of different ways that you can develop your communication skills in writing. And that would be possibly if you're studying communications or studying law, for instance, you could be contributing to some journals, getting involved in contributing to some publications at university. Any part-time office-based work. If you are studying communications or something like that, you could also have your own blog, which you could then have on your resume to demonstrate your skills. So any opportunity to, particularly if you're wanting to do a job where there is a lot of writing, any opportunity to, start your own blog page or something like that will be a way that you can develop a bit of a portfolio of writing. Oops, sorry. Okay, resilient stress management. I know that candidates find this one's quite a tricky one to answer. So often they'll ask, can you tell us about a time where you've had to overcome an obstacle to achieve a work goal or a study goal? So look, this can be quite difficult to come up with an example, particularly if you've had a fairly blessed life and had too many obstacles that you've had to overcome. Look, I guess some examples of where, examples that you could use would be if you have had the opportunity to travel in the past or hopefully in the future, traveling in a foreign country or even a remote part of Australia where you perhaps had to live in a community, you know, overcome language barriers, overcome other cultural barriers, you know, that would be a good example of resilience or trying to overcome obstacles. It could be even working or studying in terms of group assignments with someone who's really difficult to work with, someone who's really challenging, you know, a difficult personality. That could be an obstacle that you've had to overcome. Likewise, any injury, health, personal setbacks. If, for example, you have failed a subject at university, could talk about how you had to develop resilience, feedback, and, you know, put other, I guess, put actions into play in terms of recovering from that setback. And, you know, other people might use an example. For instance, they've set themselves a challenge, like a competition or running a marathon or doing a hike or something like that, and they talk about, I guess, the challenges that they had to overcome with their training and on the in the actual race. So I'm not saying this is an easy one to come up with an example, but hopefully that sort of gives you a couple of ideas about what you could potentially be talking about. COVID is obviously a really obvious one as well. If you have lost your job during COVID, if you've had to adapt to living in a different way, then obviously that's resilience as well that needs to be implemented to overcome that type of challenge. So often organisations are also looking for some example of innovation or initiative. For example, they might ask you when you've come up with a new idea that has been well received, where you have improved a process that's been well received. So again, think about examples, you know, if you've got some part-time work to talk about where you've been involved in committees, or even doing some volunteer work where you've been able to set up better ways of doing things. A group project, you might talk about an example of where you were able to find a better way for the group to work together, a better way for them to communicate, perhaps using like a project management app or something like that. So, you know, I mean, now that you kind of know what these competencies and skills that organizations will be looking for, hopefully you can kind of start, as your year progresses, start thinking about, you know, certain things that happen throughout the year, and you think, okay, oh, that, you know, that could be a really good example for innovation or initiative, you know, when I get to my interviews. Sorry, I'm a bit of trouble with this. A commercial business acumen, like I mentioned before, you know, the best way of developing your business acumen and researching companies is ideally talking to people who are working in those companies. So if you know some older students from Caulfield who are already working in some of these organisations, see if you can tap into their knowledge and experience. You know, ask them if they're free to have a coffee with you, so you can find out, you know, what it's like to work in mergers and acquisitions in a Big Four. So the more people you talk to who work in that field, that will greatly improve your business acumen and your knowledge of those different areas within a business, and also help you work out which direction you think is going to interest you most. Obviously, you know, you can register with a lot of the industry bodies as a student, where you can attend webinars and seminars, sometimes for free. So again, the more you're involved with industry bodies, the more knowledge you'll get in that area. LinkedIn, I think, is like the easiest way to keep current with news. So you could, you know, if you haven't got a LinkedIn profile already, I would strongly encourage you to set one up. And again, we're going to be talking about that in a later session. But in your LinkedIn, you could already be following all the companies that you think you might like to work for in the future. So you can follow the company. You can also follow key people in those organizations. So you actually don't have to connect with them, but you can follow them, so that every time they're posting, that you are seeing that post in your feed. Another great way to keep your industry knowledge current is you can set up Google search alerts on different topics. So if there's a particular area that you're interested in, maybe it's something to do with the environment or site contamination or something like that, you could set up a Google search alert using that keyword, and every day you will get articles sent to you, with those articles that relate to that topic. So that's a really good way of keeping current. Business journals, and obviously continuing to expand your network, using your alumni contacts, looking for people in organizations who are also ex-Caulfield. That's a great way you can start to, find some common ground with people who've also been to your school, who may be, very willing to share their experience and knowledge working in that industry. So I also mentioned value, cultural fit. So you might be sort of wondering, well, how would an organization know if I'm the right cultural fit, and what does that mean? So first of all, cultural fit is it's about, do you demonstrate the behaviors and the values of the organization? So most organizations these days will have their values on the website. So it's really important that you know the values. And also when you're preparing for interviews, think about examples of when you have demonstrated those values. So the common types of values are things like respect, integrity, diversity and inclusion, innovation, customer excellence, and collaboration. So they're quite common ones. So for example, if I was going for an interview and I was preparing an interview with an organization with these values, I'd be thinking about, well, what are the behaviors that I demonstrate in my current workplace or in my, in my group assignment, how am I demonstrating respect to members of that group? Integrity is often when you've been faced with an ethical dilemma of some type. How have you dealt with that? How do you behave when other people are watching you? So, look, if you're not sure about, what these values really mean, research them online, and research the types of behaviors that would demonstrate these values, so that it can help you come up with some good examples. Okay. Look, some other ways you could demonstrate value alignment is by getting involved in volunteer work, doing some fundraising, getting involved with the community. A lot of big corporates are now, have dedicated volunteer days where their employees can take time out and volunteer. A lot of them, back, certain, they have, charity days and donate. So, if that's important to you, I think it's great to do something that shows that you are community focused, and it definitely wouldn't hurt to have that on your resume. Okay. So I guess this is probably more of an introductory session. The other sessions that we'll run later in the year will probably have a lot more content in them. But I guess, the takeaways from this session would be, if you are earlier on in degree, really seek out those internship opportunities. As I mentioned before, the graduate positions that are filled a lot of those places will be taken by people who've already had a successful internship. So the more internships you can do, the better. Most importantly, it will give you a chance to try out different work environments and different areas of work. I think this is particularly important, particularly if you're doing a double degree. So if you're doing commerce law, for instance, and unsure whether you want to go down the commerce route or whether you want to work in a bank, whether you want to work as a lawyer or whether you want to work in management consulting, you've got so many options that it's really important that you try and get some internships so you can get a sense of a little sort of career experiments to test out the work and the environment in all of those areas. Seek out part-time work. I know it hasn't been easy in the last 12 months, but any opportunity, whether it's related to the field you want to pursue or not, it doesn't matter. Get involved in clubs and activities where you can. Join industry groups and constantly look at ways you can expand your network. Look at, your alumni functions, joining industry groups as a student. And, you know, my number one sort of takeaway, set up a professional LinkedIn profile if you haven't already. It will open up a whole new world to you in terms of type of research you can do about different organizations. If you're going for an interview, you can look up the profile of the person that you're going to meet with and what their background is. You can also follow companies so that you're getting alerts, you know, getting regular information about that company, what they're doing in your news feed. So that would be, you know, my number one thing. I think everyone needs to have a LinkedIn. Make sure it's a professional profile, professional photo. In one of my later sessions, I'm going to really get into the detail of how to make sure your profile is complete and also keyword optimized for what you want to do in the future. So a couple of useful website resources before we sort of move into questions. So one of those is Grad Australia. As I mentioned before, they advertise internships, they advertise graduate programs, but they also have these you know, surveys that they do every year where they will have a list of the top internships and the top employers that candidates have actually rated. So you'll get a really good list of companies that offer internships and grad programs from some of those links. Grad Connection, great website for, again, looking for internships and graduate programs. You can filter by your industry, filter by location, and you'll see heaps of information about each company, plus, you know, what their criteria is, and also, you know, obviously information about the process. If you're more interested in the Australian Public Service, working in government, there's also the graduate portal for APS jobs. So note those down. If you haven't looked at them already, hopefully a lot of you are already familiar with those sites. Then, as I mentioned before, this is a link to intern programs. There's a great link to top graduate employers. And that's collating feedback from people who've actually done these programs and what their experience has been like. Okay, so this is a bit of an outline of the next session. So Wednesday, the 19th of May, I'm going to be talking to you in a lot of detail about what your resume should look like. So what sort of content you should be including, what you should be leaving out, sort of best practice structure, and, you know, how you can start developing your resume, you know, throughout your career. So, you know, starting off with a fairly, I guess, simple resume, but how you can build on that as your career progresses. 4th of August, we're going to be focusing on LinkedIn. So using it for your job search, using it for networking, and also building a personal brand in your industry. So LinkedIn is a great way for you to start getting noticed by organizations, even if you're already working. It's a really good way to continue to build a bit of a profile and a brand in the industry that you're interested in. And then 20th of October, we're going to focus on preparing for formal behavioural job interviews, particularly focusing on using the STAR method correctly, making sure that you've got very specific stories and examples that demonstrate those criteria and those competencies that I've mentioned earlier. So, time for questions, and feel free to please, I'd love you to be brave and, you know, unmute yourself and actually just ask me the question if you want to ask me, rather than including it in the chat. I have got a question from Ella. So one of Ella's was, if you can remember, what was Alan's average cutoff? So I think I mentioned before, I'm pretty sure it was around 70. And I did run that past another friend of mine who is currently a graduate recruitment manager with Talus, which is more engineering consulting firm. And she agreed that their was around the same. So as I mentioned, like, if yours is a little bit lower than that, I wouldn't worry, particularly if you've got lots of other extracurricular activities on your resume. I think also probably be a little bit more leniency given COVID and some of the challenges that students face during that time. Probably your more recent marks, if you're one of your more senior years, are going to be more important than your first year marks. So if you haven't had a great first year, then try and improve over the next couple of years. Will be the later marks that they'll be more interested in.
Leah.
One more question from, I think it's another Ella. If you have a narrow resume, i.e. heavily skewed to finance, how would you recommend addressing that in an interview for a related but different field, e.g. commercial law? Ella, are you there?
I am, yep.
So when you say heavily skewed to finance, do you mean that the part-time work or your internships have been more finance related?
Yeah, exactly. Part-time work, internships, and uni committees have all been in finance.
Okay, and you're now sort of looking to apply for internships or grad programs in law?
Yep.
Yeah. Look, I don't think it would matter. I would perhaps, you could reference in your resume that you have had some great experience in finance, however, that you feel you're now more interested in doing a commercial law degree, that you feel that it will be a better fit to your interests and perhaps more aligned with your skill set. Particularly, do you have strong writing skills?
I do a law degree, so I am interested in that and I've developed skills in that area, I guess. It is commercial law that I'm interested in, so it is somewhat related, but I just thought it would be worth asking the question.
Yeah, look, I don't think it would matter. I think as long as you can demonstrate that you have transfer, like your skill set is also aligned to law in terms of writing, business writing skills, research skills, influencing skills, for instance. Look, I think they would be happy that you've done internships at all. I don't think it would matter that you haven't done any in law.
Thanks, Leah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yes, I've got one, Leah. Go first, Scarlett.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Scarlett, and I'm wondering.
Scarlett.
So I'm doing commerce, but I'm doing major studies. So like the study load is already like quite intensive. So like, what would you say like the proportion of time to like searching for internships and jobs? Because I find it really hard to balance, work, study, and like life, and the other things.
Yes, you have to live as well, don't you? Look, hopefully with the application, so do you mean actually sort of writing all the cover letters and responding to the criteria is so time consuming?
No, just like searching for jobs as well, because there's like heaps of opportunities, really.
Are you using some of those graduate websites already?
Not yet, but I'm going to like start to look into it.
Yeah. So if you're using, Grad Connection, Grad Australia, and you should be able to identify the internships that relate to actuarial pretty quickly. Hopefully, like if you have one cover letter, and like your resume shouldn't have to change that much. Your cover letter, obviously, you need to make sure it's addressed to the right person, and probably include at least one paragraph about the actual organisation you're applying for and why you want to work for them. And obviously be really careful that you don't mix them up. There's nothing worse, getting an application for Allens when it's addressed to Freehills. So, graduate recruiters, big cross against the person. So take the time, just, with the cover letter, even just to make sure it's addressed to the right person, and you have one paragraph about the firm and why you really would like to work for them. The rest of it, hopefully you can sort of leave and keep it fairly consistent, highlighting just the key skills that you can bring to the intern program. So don't spend hours rewriting cover letters for every program. Yeah, but look, maybe just set aside 2 hours a week or an hour, maybe 2 hours that's dedicated to your job search, and just stick to that, and rather than trying to do a bit here and there and trying to fit it in with your study.
Yeah, thank you.
It is time consuming, but it is worth it if you can get an internship.
Yeah, true.
I think there was another question.
Yeah, I had one. My question was about the internships as well. So I graduated last year, and I was just wondering, Leah, what you thought, if is there a time that's a bit too early to start doing internships, or when do you recommend starting?
Oh, so you finished school last year?
Yes.
Okay, so usually in the internship programs, they will specify at what point in your studies you need to be. So as long as you meet the criteria, then it shouldn't be a problem. But in terms of actually organising your own internships, you could start anytime. So if you know someone who works in an organisation who you could go and do, some part-time work with, or an informal internship, then I think, there's no time it's never too soon.
Okay, perfect.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I do that most of them will say penultimate year, just in my experience, certainly in the bigger organisations.
Yeah. Is that for grad programs? That's grad programs, though?
For internships. So
for internships, yeah.
And the rest of the accounting firms, they were all asking for penultimate students.
Yeah, so they will usually specify so you know whether you're eligible.
Though in saying that, you can half fudge the system as well, and then because they're not usually too bad in terms of you change your mind. Just depends.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Eloise.
What if one of the employees?
Oh, sorry, I might go Scarlett. I think Eloise is asking. I might just listen to Eloise first, and then we'll come back to you, Scarlett. Is that all right? Yeah. Sorry, Eloise. Do you want to just repeat that?
No worries. I'm Eloise. I'm a vet student. I'm 2 years before finishing. And with our vet course, we do a lot of placements. And I was wondering how I don't have a lot of time during the days to do any more placements. I was wondering how, in a smaller scale, applying for jobs with opportunities where there's only one boss and there's only a couple of shareholders, how that would affect your applying and how you do CV and your resume and all that.
So are you thinking when you apply to a vet clinic?
Yeah, so we when we're applying to vet clinics, to differentiate myself from everyone else.
So look, good question. Are these they're not formally advertised programs? They're just ones that you're seeking out yourself?
Look, there's internships and as well as that, we've got jobs that are advertised on specific websites and stuff.
Yeah. So look, I guess it's really drawing on your motivation to work in that area, perhaps choosing something about that particular clinic that they offer that appeals to you. But I'd also be talking about why you feel your personality is well suited to vet, what particular soft skills that you could bring to that role, in terms of client service, initiative, problem solving. So I think, just think about, if you were a vet and you were recruiting a student, what type of qualities would you be looking for in that person? So without sort of seeing your resume or your background, it's sort of hard to give you specific advice about what you should be including. But I just sort of be focusing on your reasons for applying, what's motivating you to be a vet, why you really would like to work for that clinic, and what particular soft skills and, industry knowledge you can bring. But I think, if you're doing lots of placements already, I guess the internships are probably more for for students who are doing courses where there's no placements. So you're already getting a lot of that work experience in the course already.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yes, but you know, you have to have a break at some time as well. Have a holiday.
I wish it works like that. It doesn't really. Thank you.
No, pleasure. Scarlett, I'll come back to you.
Yep. So it was like a very specific question. What if you like the employer like ask you during an interview, say like, what are your weaknesses, and do you like tell them straight or you know?
So a question I get asked every day, Scarlett. So it's a good question. My advice is sometimes you might read that you should turn make it a positive and turn it into a negative. So, you know, saying you're a perfectionist or something like that, that's actually a positive rather than a weakness. I don't agree with that. So when they ask you that question, they're asking you that question to see self-aware. So no one wants to hire someone who doesn't think that they have any faults, because they'll be very hard to teach or train. So I would actually choose something that is a real weakness, but isn't a weakness going to stop you from getting the job. Okay, so often our weaknesses are things that just don't come as natural to us as to other people. So they're things that we're aware of that we just need to work on. It's something that we're aware of, and we're already doing things to try and overcome it. That's what's important in that question. So it could be just more like a personality trait, something that just doesn't, you know, if you are an introvert, for instance, a natural weakness for an introvert is that they may be a little bit more reserved when they meet new people. So in a group meeting, for example, they may not contribute as much to other people until they're comfortable with the team and the subject matter. So that's, you know, it's not necessarily a weakness that's going to stop you from the job, unless you're applying for a job in sales where you have to be out meeting new people every day. Okay, so think about something that isn't going to stop you from getting the job, but shows that you actually understand yourself and know yourself quite well.
Yeah, so is like not doing well with like sudden changes a like weakness that's going to prevent like most people getting the job?
Not being adaptable, so being quite structured.
Yeah, like quite over organized.
Yeah, look, it would depend on the job. So if you are applying for a job where you have to be adaptable, like say you're applying for a firefighter, and you have to, you know, drop everything, you know, you're not going to say that you're not adaptable. But if you, I mean, I would think for an actuary, they would really prefer someone who's very well organized and structured and planned. So I think it's understanding the job you're applying for and just making sure that you're not giving a weakness that is a key requirement for the job.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Could I also add to that? I think it depends on, if you're aware of something, you're usually going to be working on it as well. So that can also be worth adding, in the sense that, you know, you're aware that this is a weakness, but it is something you're working on, rather than trying to just spin it into a strength. That's
right. So showing that you are aware of it and what you've already done and continuing to do to try and overcome that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, we've got about 10 more minutes. So I'll open it up to one more time. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay, well, look, if you do have questions, feel free to email them through to Rachel, and I'm sure she'd be happy to send them on to me. Or you can, if you've got a LinkedIn account, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a question during the week. So I'm very happy to, if anyone does have a question that they don't want to raise in this forum. So look, thank you for joining us. It's been a great session, and I'm so pleased that some of you were able to ask some questions so it could be interactive. I really hope that's given you some ideas about things that you could be doing to prepare for these recruitment processes. You know, I think you've probably all got some great backgrounds. You're probably great students. So it's just adding a few extra things to your resume if you have the time and the energy, that just might sort of help stand out from some other candidates. So Linda, did you do a quick wrap up?
Yes, I will. I just want to say thank you to everybody for participating tonight. I can't speak. Thank you to Leah. Leah, a great session. Certainly wonderful tips and reminders of how important it is for us to be thinking about laterally about our skills and about where we want to go and doing the right research and asking the right questions. So invaluable, lots of information, and so important, I think, to just continue to keep asking, not be afraid to ask the questions. So I'm really delighted with the fact that we have everybody here, and I hope that you tell your past students as well, fellow past students and peers and friends about this, because we really want to build this into a program where we're going to do this each year, where we'll have 3 or 4 sessions a year that you can continue to build on the knowledge that Leah started giving us tonight. So I encourage you to come along and attend the other ones, and send us your feedback. We will send out a bit of a survey so you can give us any tips. But thank you, Leah. Wonderful.
Thanks, Linda. And look, if anyone, wants, I've got a podcast that they'll do some podcast interviews about interviews and resumes. So there may be a couple of podcast episodes we'll find on my website that may be of help to you as well. Some of you might have interviews before we get to the interview coaching session later in the year. So feel free to jump on the website and you can download the podcast from there.